Hello, I'm Lauren Moss. I'm the editor and founder of Finance Colombia, the only English language business news publication 100% focused on Colombia. Our readers are multinational executives, institutional investors that have activities or investments here in Colombia. And this is the presentation. I'm redoing it here in English. This is the presentation that I gave in Spanish originally the 24th of June in Bogotá at the fourth annual Colombia Oil and Gas Conference organized by Vostock Capital. I've redone the presentation here in English for the convenience of our readers and listeners. So what happened Monday? We're talking about Monday after Monday the 20th, June 20th, the day after Colombia's Sunday presidential elections when Gustavo Petro won the election. So we saw that when markets opened, Ecopetrol, the Colombian petroleum giant, fell almost 13%. It's the largest company in Colombia. It trades on the New York Stock Exchange under the symbol EC. Other companies, Promigas, we have here attending the conference, the president of Promigas. Her company fell almost 7%. Colcap, which is the basket of uh, bellwether Colombian stocks, was down almost 7% as well. But overall, in worldwide, it was a good day for the markets. Most markets were up. Mexico, they were up. In Europe, they were up. New York Stock Exchange was up. So we saw something that we can go beyond attributing to general market factors and say this is something that is particular to Colombia. So my role is not to say who's the good guy or who's the bad guy or take sides. The elections are over and the Colombian people voted, and that's their responsibility and their right. But as an analyst, my job is to report what happens and then try to interpret it and make sense of it. In April, on the campaign, the now president-elect Gustavo Petro was quoted as saying, "What do we export? Coal, petroleum, and cocaine. The three produce violence, not just cocaine. Petroleum production kills communities." So he's not exactly a friend of the sector, if you will. He's not a friend of the petroleum industry. He also said that his first act as president would be the cessation of contracting for petroleum explorations. Now, that would mean a loss of $4.5 billion US dollar equivalent going into the Colombian government over the next 4 years during his administration. Um, that number came from the petroleum sector. Um, Some other statistics for us to take a look at. Petroleum made up a third of Colombian exports in last year by value. A halt to exploration would mean a loss of $4.5 billion in tax revenue to the government between 2022 and 2026. This is according to ACP, which is the Petroleum Industry Trade Industry Association. So you can keep that in mind. And on one hand, they might have access to some of the best numbers. On the other hand, you could argue that they have a point of view and they have a dog in the fight. So you can take those statistics as you will. Um, Petroleum is the petroleum sector is 5% of Colombian GDP and 15% of government revenues. And if Colombia has to consume the petroleum right now, Colombian produces petroleum for its own domestic consumption, but then has enough to export. If Colombia has to consume what it's exporting, that would be a loss of $68 billion in foreign exchange that currently comes into the country. Colombia would have to import natural gas from 2026 and liquid petroleum fuel. That's refined petroleum, so that's gasoline, diesel fuel, jet fuel, fuel oil, these kinds of things like that from 2028. Colombia, I don't think, is a big user of fuel oil. There may be some industrial uses. It's used in shipping. Colombia does have a maritime economy. It has two oceans. It's on both the Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean. But anyway, what does this mean for the industry? Well, upstream, very poor, because to be blunt, if he follows through with what he says he wants to do, that means no new contracts, no unconventionals, no fracking, and the considerable base of experts and strategic service providers to the sector will diminish as they move on to other uh, areas of more opportunity. There are a lot of companies that have been here in Colombia for a long time, not just petroleum companies like Chevron and Occidental, but service providers like Halliburton and Schlumberger. I was at a Schlumberger 80th anniversary event about 3 or 4 years ago here in Colombia. Um, so if you're in that sector, it just doesn't look good. There's no reason to try to polish it or be eloquent. Things look bad if you are involved in petroleum drilling and production or exploration. Midstream, the terminals are going to need to, the terminals that are now exporting petroleum are going to need to import petroleum at some point. There is a network of pipelines in Colombia that will, those that are transporting things like fuel oils and things from terminals to from refineries to terminals will continue to be utilized. I think where things don't look good would be growth um, in new pipelines that bring crude oil in from the well fields or gas fields. I don't think it looks good for that part of the sector. Refineries are going to need to continue to operate even if Colombia begins to import petroleum. Refineries might invest in alternative capabilities such as hydrogen production, for example. Um, ACP put together in their study two different scenarios. One is if the country does move to a renewable energy footing. Colombia already um, is a big consumer and producer of renewable energy. If you talk about hydroelectric power, about over 70% of Colombia's electricity is hydroelectric. Um, there's a mammoth project, Hidroituango, that's being built several hours north of Medellin. It's not online yet. When it comes online, it should augment Colombia's electrical generation capacity by 20% in this country of 50 million people. But suppose the sector, let's say for transportation, as people move to hydrogen and things like that, then we might expect that investment in oil and gas in what ACP considers a best case scenario will gradually go down. It'll go down slowly as the industry and service providers move to renewable energies for transportation. That may be hydrogen, it may be electrical vehicles for urban areas. But then we said that's future A. In future B, that's if we have an aggressive, no new petroleum, read my lips kind of situation where the president is very strict about that and blocks all new investment. And in that case, we see a more drastic decline in investment in the sector. What that means for the many contractors and service providers, goods and service providers that attend the Colombia Oil and Gas Conference, we look at, for the most part, in the future A, investments continue to climb slightly, not significantly, but slightly over the next 4 years, and then they slowly begin to decline again as the service providers upgrade and transform their businesses to become service providers to renewable energy. But in the future B, the more drastic future, the read my lips, no new petroleum future, we see a more precipitous decline in the contracting of goods and services providers. The opportunities, those people that would contract with Ecopetrol or that would contract with the drilling firms or um, the refineries, the other companies that are active in the oil and gas sector, it would look a lot less positive for those companies in that sector. Things that I think are important to watch down here. Let's see what the Colombian Congress does. Are they going to be allies or opposition to the new presidential administration? Uh, Colombia has pretty good separation of powers, so we can expect the Congress to have quite a say. Now, there's a lot of horse trading going on right now as the president is trying to build a coalition in Congress. It is a U.S. style Congress. It's not a European style parliament. So but the big difference between, say, Colombia and the U.S. is that you have 5 or 6 major parties down here. So it's not like a 50-50 split. So um, you have to go and negotiate with other political parties, bring people into your administration with ministry appointments and cabinets and things like that, and then the different pet projects and regional projects. In the U.S., we call it port. Down here, they call it marmalade. Um, but keep a close eye on Colombian Congress. I'll be keeping a close eye on that and reporting on that as well. The coming economic situation, what's happening? We already see interest rates going up significantly. We already see the peso down under 4,000 to 1, 4,000 pesos to the dollar. The peso's at a historic low right now. I think a lot of that is uncertainty and a lack of an investor skepticism, I would call it. Um, let's take a look at how the peso continues to behave as Colombian goods and services become cheaper to the outside world, but also importantly, as goods and services from the outside world become more expensive for Colombians. Colombia does produce a lot of agricultural products, but it for a country that consumes a huge amount of bread and pastries, it's not a wheat producing country. So what happens when wheat prices double? But if we're going into a recession, which some people think we may be going into, then how does that constrain the policy electives of the incoming administration? Take a look at all the president's men, the people that he appoints as advisors, the people he appoints to ministries, Men Hacienda, which is the finance ministry, MME, which is the Ministry of Mines and Energy, ANH, which is the National Hydrocarbons Agency. So the people he appoints, who will be the next president of Ecopetrol? The people he appoints will say a lot about what we can expect over the next 4 years. Social conditions. How will the public react to rising prices? Next door in neighboring Ecuador, there's social unrest right now where people are protesting because of rising prices that I don't think the president of Ecuador really has anything to do with, but people are blaming him, and they've taken to the streets, and there's some social unrest right now just to the south of us. So what happens here when fuel shortages or fuel prices raise? Because if the president cuts off these options for the petroleum industry, then we are going to see inevitable uh, price hikes. And how will not just the general public react to that, but the very powerful trucking sector? We had a few years ago some crippling strikes by the transportation industry. What does it do for supply stability? The ability for Colombian retailers to maintain their shelves stocked. And so these are things that we want to take a look at. And these are going to be challenges already, but then any kind of drastic moves in the petroleum sector can amplify the effects of these challenges. So these are the things that I'm going to have my eyes on here down in Colombia. Thank you very much. Here are some links that may be interesting to you. Finance Colombia, that's my publication. You can subscribe directly at fcsubscribe.com or just go to financecolombia.com. Remember, Colombia is spelled with an O, not with a U. My LinkedIn profile is there if you want to contact me. The podcast is simply Colombia Business News. It's available everywhere fine podcasts are heard. So iTunes, Audible, Spotify, Google Podcasts is there. The YouTube channel, which you're watching right now, is Colombia Business News Recap. The report, it's in Spanish, but the ACP report, which is really good, there's the link to download it. And Vostock Capital Events, which Vostock Capital, I often speak at their events in Latin America. And the last one, the Oil and Gas Congress, is where I presented this. So would love to hear from you. Would love to hear what you think. And thank you for your attention and your time.